Hi everyone, it's Olivia here with another InDesign Zine Booklet Layout software tutorial. Now this tutorial is different than the first one that I made, which is right here. And that is because this one is not specific to Riso. So it's for if you eventually want to send this zine print job to a local laser printing service, or if you want to print it from your school or home computer. Also, it's going to teach you how to use InDesign as your primary layout software. And what I mean by that is, in the previous tutorial, we saw that, for example, the first page of Greer's zine, The Satisfactory but Not Especially Good Book of Zoology, already has been laid out here in Photoshop. So she has her graphic elements, she has her text, and the size of this document is already the size of the zine. So it's 5 by 7 inches, which is the size of the page or zine. And so all the layout has already been done in Photoshop. So in this tutorial, we are going to learn how to do all of this layout work in InDesign. And the zine that we are going to be working with is a Garden in Manila zine by yours truly. And that's because this zine has everything. It has illustrations, it has text, it has shapes as graphic elements, and we're also going to be using the facing pages option this time, which isn't something that we talked about in the other InDesign tutorial. So hopefully this will be helpful to you come the time when you need to put your zine together very quickly using InDesign. Alright, so let's take a look at some of the things that are going on in this zine. So if I hit W, we go into preview mode, which gets rid of those guide marks and bounding boxes. And if we go to the cover, we see that there's text and a dotted circle over an illustration. So we're going to start to learn how to build up these elements on a page in InDesign. Next, if we go to this full page spread, we see that there's text that's just hiding behind this illustration. And it's also in my other pages as well. So we're going to learn how to do this efficiently using clipping paths. So if we took a look at these two pages, you'll see that instead of an illustration, I've put in a photograph. And that's because these pages make up my center spread, which is in the middle of my booklet. So I think that the center spread has a special place in booklet layout because aside from the front and the back cover, it's the only set of pages that is not getting interrupted by a folded sheet. So I'll see a lot of illustrators put in illustrations that span across the whole center spread. So that does not mean that you can't put spreads in other areas of your booklet, but there's just a different kind of special payoff that you get when you put it in the middle of your booklet. In my case, instead of just talking about another plant and putting in an illustration of that plant, I decided to tell a side story about this garden in my zine and put in an actual photograph to break it up a little bit. Alright, so this zine is 40 pages, but we are going to roughly recreate just 12 of them, and then afterwards send it to the home printer. So let's get started. So let's create a new document, and we are going to make it 12 pages. And we're definitely going to be using facing pages this time. And our booklet size is going to be half letter. So most booklets are half letter size, or 5.5 by 8.5, or full letter size, or 8.5 by 11. Now every single printer I've worked with has recommended at least 1/8 inch bleed. So we're going to type 1/8 and in. And that is going to convert it into picus and point system for us. Now for columns, we're going to put 3 columns to start. And that's not because we want to lay out our text into 3 columns in our zine, but because I was taught in art school that odd numbers help break up our page into more pleasing proportions. So anyway, it's just a good guide, so we'll just go with it. So here's our 12-page booklet, and you can see a thumbnail of that in this area. We are currently on page 1. Here's an example of facing pages. So back to page 1, as you can see, it's been divided into 3 columns. This black line over here represents the crop or the trim, so it's the final size of our zine. And this red line is our 1/8 inch bleed. So if you have any elements that are full bleed, you have to extend them past this black line into at least this red line. So we'll start by working on page 1, or the cover. And the first thing I'm going to do is to put an illustration in it. So I'm going to go into File and Place, and I'm going to select an illustration, which is a Photoshop file. And I'm just going to click anywhere to bring that image in. So I'm going to talk quickly about this frame situation here in InDesign. So this blue bounding box is the frame, and if I double click on it, it turns red, and that reddish brown bounding box pertains to the object inside this frame. And you can also move that object within this frame using this little donut shape right here. So the way to think about it is, if you think about a literal frame and there's a picture inside that frame, you can either move the whole frame, or you can move the picture inside of that frame. So this frame kind of acts like a clipping mask. So if I take the handlebar of the blue bounding box, I can clip this image without actually changing the image or the object inside of this frame. So if I grabbed this object directly, I can also move that object. See, this red bounding box is moving, so I can move this object as well. So when you're working in InDesign with images and other objects, you have to think about, are you moving the frame or are you moving the object inside the frame? All right, so now that we've clarified that, I'm going to undo my changes. And I'm going to start organizing this image on my page. So I am going to make sure that this is blue because I want to move the whole frame over. And I am just going to put this image on the page. So I want my image to be full bleed. So as you can see, this image is going past that red, so I know that it's going to get cut past the final trim to make it go all the way to the edge. And then I am going to, just to make it clean, I am just going to take this frame and I am just going to make it go all the way to my bleed. So as you can see, even though I am changing the size of the frame, the size of the image isn't changing. That's because I'm literally just changing the outside frame and not the image itself. Alright, so that's the front cover. Now I want to extend this image to the back cover because, as you can see from my zine, it's actually one continuous image across the 2 pages. So I am going to select this bounding box and I am going to do copy, and I'm going to go to page 12, which is the back cover, and I'm going to select paste and place. So it's going to place this image as if the other side of page 12 is page 1. So all I'm going to do is extend this blue frame bounding box over. And as you can see, that has generated the rest of this image. And if I want to keep this clean, I am just also going to clip that image to the bleed. And now we know that when we send this to be printed in Booklet, it's going to be continuous like this. So now let's put in the title text. So I'm going to go to page 1. And the first thing I'm going to do actually is twirl down layer 1 and lock that image in place. So that way I don't accidentally move it around, since the text is going to go right over this. So I'm going to hit the text tool and I am just going to put in a garden in Manila. And I'm going to make that larger. So right here is the overset text. So in order to make that plus sign go away, you just need to make your text box larger. So now we're going to apply a fancy font to this, and for that I am going to use a font that I just downloaded, which is called Before the Rain. And in order to get rid of this hyphenation, we're just going to uncheck hyphenate. So that is going to prevent automatic hyphenation of your text going forward. And I'm just going to break up this in and Manila. And what I want to do is I want the tail for this N to extend past the trim and be cut off, just as a stylistic choice. So let's do that. And in order to preview this, I'm going to hit W. And in fact, I toggle between this preview mode and normal mode all the time. Alright, so I'm actually just going to show you the final version of the text for this cover page. So if we go over here to the final version, you'll see that I have broken out the text even more, and that is so that I can play around with the size and the positioning of these words. If you look at Manila, I've actually increased the space between the characters of this word, and that is called kerning. I really wanted to take advantage also of the 3-column system, so I moved the whole text block a little bit closer to the left edge of the leftmost column, because if you look at the draft, the caps are actually sitting in the middle and the whole text block is heavily weighted to the right. So I think that this looks better, and that's why I made these decisions. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do for the cover page is to create a graphic element, and that is a dotted circle. So if we go over to the rectangle tool and hold it down with our mouse, we can select the ellipse tool. And I'm going to hit Shift to constrain the circle to a perfect circle, and I'm also going to hit Alt so that the circle will grow from the center. So as you can see, the circle is growing from the center. And I'm going to stop right here. And I'm actually going to make this Japanese dots. And I'm also going to increase it to about 6 points. And I'm going to make the stroke paper. We're not going to add a fill to this, or else it's going to take up the whole circle. And we're just going to move it there. And we're going to hit W to preview this. That looks pretty good. It's pretty close to the final. But now I want this other side of the circle to also be in the back cover. So I'm going to click this. I'm going to hit Edit, Copy, or Control C. And I'm going to go to the back cover and hit Paste in Place. And so that's the other side of our circle. And so if we wanted to look at the final version, this is what it looks like on the back cover, and this is what it looks like on the front cover. And the reason why I wanted to add the dotted circle there is because I wanted to create a bridge between the text and the illustration. And also I wanted to balance out the text even more. As you can see, the circle is offset a little bit to the left, whereas the text is offset a little bit to the right. Alright, so the first spread that we are going to recreate is actually this mango spread, which is manga in Filipino. And there's actually a lot going on here. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is place the illustration. So we're going to go to File and then Place. And I'm going to select mango. But this time, instead of just clicking and letting the image load by itself, I'm going to constrain the size of this image by clicking and dragging. And it's going to resize in proportion to the size of your original image. And there it is. And then I'm going to make sure that this blue bounding box is selected. So if you double click, it turns into the red one, which is selecting the object inside the frame. But I want to move the whole frame, so I'm going to make sure the blue is selected, and I'm just going to click and drag it in place. So I wanted to put most of the action close to the leftmost column. So you never want to put the important parts of your image in the center fold, because that, especially if it's not the center spread, is vulnerable to things like gaps and offsetting. So you never want to put the middle or the center of someone's face right there in the center fold. Alright, so now let's label this illustration. So I'm going to go over to the type tool and I'm going to create a text box. And let's put in the name of this plant. And I will make it font size 100 to start and choose our fancy font. Before the Rain. And I'm going to increase the size of that. And I'm going to put it right around there. So as you can see, a part of this font is actually going to be cut off at the bottom for stylistic purposes, and we can preview that by pressing W. And so we want to hide a part of that font under these leaves. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go twirl down this layer and I'm going to move that text under the image. So now it's under this image frame. However, as you can see, it's getting covered by the image frame, because if we go over to Photoshop, you can see that the background layer is actually solid white. It's not transparent. So this whole thing is a part of the image. So in order for us to be able to see the text under the leaves, we're going to need to hide the solid white background. And to do that, we're going to select this image and we're going to go to Object, Clipping Path, and Options. And under Type, we're going to select Detect Edges, which is going to detect the edges of our non-white background. So if you hit Preview, you can see where those edges are. Now you can play around with the options here for threshold and tolerance, and if you just Google the descriptions, you can see what they do. But for our purposes, I think these edges are fine, and so we're just going to go with it. And so now you can see that the solid white background is getting hidden by these clipping paths, and we can go ahead and see the text under the leaves. And so this is actually a very easy and efficient way to hide solid white backgrounds. So I think text boxes are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend that much time on that. So I'm just going to create one right here and paste in the description for this plant right there. There's a little bit of overset text, so I'm just going to expand that and call it a day. But I do want to show you how to create this call out right here. So this call out, as you can see, is a dotted circle. However, it's also acting as a frame for this image inside. So let's see how to create that. So first I'm going to click on the ellipse tool and I'm going to click on Shift. But this time I'm not going to click Alt because I don't want it to grow from the center. I want it to grow from the edge of where I click. So Shift and click. So as you can see, it's growing from the edge, and I'm going to make it about that size and move it to there. And then I am going to make it into Japanese dots and maybe make it 3 points. And I'm going to change the color to gray. So let's zoom in. And take a look at a preview version of this. Alright, so that looks good for our purposes. Alright, so to place an image into this dotted circle shape and use this dotted circle shape as sort of like a clipping mask for your image frame, we are first going to go to File, Place, and we're going to select the image that we want to put inside of that dotted circle, which in this case is mango leaves. Now I'm just going to place this inside my document and constrain the size of it by clicking and dragging. So that looks good to start. Now I'm going to rotate this to make it the correct orientation. Okay, that's looking really good. And in order to resize this image as well as the frame for this image, I am just going to make sure that this blue bounding box is selected, and I'm going to hit Control Shift and grab one of these corner handlebars and drag to make it smaller. So if you don't hit both Command or Control and Shift and you just resize the frame, then nothing's going to happen to the image inside of it. So in order to also resize the image or the object inside of this frame, you definitely want to hit Control or Command and Shift at the same time. So to place this image inside of this circle object, we are going to first make sure it's selected, then hit Edit, and then Cut. And then now we are going to select this circle and we are going to hit Edit and then Paste into. So now you can see that that frame for the mango leaves has been pasted into the frame of this dotted circle. Now in order for us to move this mango leaf around inside of this circular frame, we are just going to double click, and as you can see, that is the frame for our mango leaf. So we are just going to grab that and move it. And in fact, I think I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so that more of the leaves can fit into the circle frame. And I'm going to preview that. And I think that looks good. So that is how you place another image frame inside of another shape and use that as sort of a way to clip and constrain the image. Alright, so that's actually all that we are going to do with this spread. So the next thing that we are going to work on is this one right here with the photograph. And that's because I want to use it to illustrate the linking system in InDesign. So if we go over to here and go to facing pages 4 and 5, we're going to go ahead and place that image in the layout. So I'm going to select that image and I'm going to constrain the size of this image by clicking and dragging. Also, to keep it neat, I am going to clip this image to the bleed. And you have to make sure that it's the blue bounding box that is selected and not the red one. So now that that is selected, we can go over to this links panel right here. And if you don't see it, you can go to Window and Links to make it show up. So if we go to here, you can see that this is the original file that is linked to this image. So the way that InDesign works is that when you place images into InDesign, it's actually creating a link to the original image rather than placing the original into your layout. And that means that if you update the original image and save it, as long as it's the same file name, you can just update and refresh InDesign to display the latest version of that image. And that's great because it prevents you from having to delete this and then put in a new version every time you need to make a change to your original image. So let's see how that works. So if I open up the original image and I make it black and white, or grayscale actually, and hit save, and it's still the same file name, we can go to InDesign. It's going to give you a notification. You can double click this, or you can go into this drop down menu to update all links. And as you can see, it has updated our InDesign to be the latest version, which is in grayscale. I'm going to undo this change by going to edit and step backward and saving it. And also refresh this by double clicking that warning sign. And I wanted to show you another feature of InDesign that might confuse you, and that is that when you first place your image, it might look pixelated like this. And that's because in order to save on processing resources, InDesign will just display a lower quality version of your image in the beginning. Now, if you want to view the high quality version, you can just right click and go to display performance and click high quality display. And that's going to show you the highest quality display for this image. But it might slow down the software. So after looking at it and checking it, you might want to go back to typical display, which is what I usually work with. Alright, so I think at this point you now have a good basic understanding of how InDesign works, and also you pretty much know how I did the layout for my zine. So what we're going to do is delete a bunch of pages from the zine until we get to 12 pages, and we're going to learn how to export that for your printer, as well as print a booklet on the home printer. So the great thing about InDesign as opposed to laying out in Photoshop is how easy it is to add pages, delete pages, and move pages around. So if you go to our Photoshop tutorial, you can see that I had to manually organize those pages in booklet ordering and then lay them out as such. And there isn't really an easy way for me to reorganize all those pages. But here in InDesign, I can just take page 9 from this pages panel and drag that to another page to move it. Or I can also just select that, spread, right click, and delete these spreads. Also, I can insert pages by right-clicking and inserting pages. And you can specify where you want the pages to go. So if you want to insert 2 pages after page 7 right here to create another spread, it's really easy to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and randomly select a bunch of pages and deleting them until we get to 12. Alright, so now that we're down to our final 12 pages, let's take a look at how you might export this for your laser printer or print it on your home printer. So first, let's take a look at how to export it for your printer. So every single printer I've worked with has always asked for single-page PDFs with crops and bleeds. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to PDF Presets, and we're going to start with High Quality Print. And we're just going to save that PDF. And so under these settings, we're going to first make sure that we selected pages and not spreads, because if you select spreads, it's going to export the PDF as double page spreads, which printers don't want. They just want single pages. So we're going to make sure that that is selected. Now we're going to view PDF after exporting. Under compression, I normally don't downsample, but I do compress so that my PDF isn't ridiculously massive. Under marks and bleeds, we're going to use document bleed settings, and this is very important because this makes sure that the bleed is the 1/8 inch bleed that we've set at the beginning for this document. And we are also going to turn on crops and bleeds because every single printer I've worked with has asked for these. So we're just going to include that in our PDF, and I'm going to go ahead and hit export. Alright, so this is the high quality PDF that you would submit to your local laser printer. As you can see, it has crop marks and bleed marks, and it's in single pages and in numerical order because they don't actually need it to be in booklet ordering because they have their own imposition software to deal with that. So submitting this should be good. Alright, so let's take a look at how to print this on the home printer. So for that, I'm actually going to go to File and Print Booklet. And we're going to go to Print Settings. And I'm actually going to select my home printer, which is just this Canon right here. And if you have a blank page in your zine, which is a page that doesn't have art or text or any other object in it, you want to make sure that you click on Print Blank Pages. Otherwise, InDesign is going to take your pages with actual objects in them and shift them together and ignore your blank page. So if you don't click this, it's going to mess up your page ordering if you have a blank page. Under Setup, we're just going to do 8.5 by 11 because my booklet is half letter, so if you unfold that, it becomes a full letter size sheet. And so we are just going to select that, and we are going to make it landscape, and we're going to scale to fit and make it centered. And we're actually also going to use document bleed settings to make sure that there's a 1/8 inch bleed all around. And I also want to show the crop and the bleed marks for my booklet. Now, if you're printing at home, you may not want these marks because you may just want to staple your booklet and fold it in half and call it a day. But I actually want to see these marks, so I'm gonna put them in. Under graphics, I'm just gonna hit send data all because I don't actually know what the other ones do. So I'm just gonna enter the setup for my printer because I just want to check a couple things. Okay, first I'm going to use fast quality because I want to save ink. And then under page setup, because this is a booklet, which means the pages have to be double-sided, I'm going to hit manual duplex, which just means I have to feed it in manually myself. And I think I'm going to do short side stapling on the left, which means instead of flipping your page this way, it's going to flip your page this way to keep the orientation the same. So I think that's good for me. And I'm going to hit OK, and I'm just going to preview how it's going to look. And as you can see, it's organizing all the pages in booklet numbering for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit print and just hit OK, and it's going to start printing. So it says follow these directions to prepare to print the other side. Keeping the print side facing up, load the paper back into the front tray without changing its orientation. This is how it printed, so this is how I'm going to pop it back in. Actually, I'm going to feed it individually because my printer tends to jam, so I'm just going to feed it in. Alright, so let's organize these pages. I hope I did this right. Alright, so here are the pages. I've had to manually flip the paper over and refeed it to my home printer because it's not a duplex printing machine, so it doesn't flip the paper for you. So here's the zine, and it's got the marks on it, and if my printer did it right, then I should just be able to fold these sheets in half. And as you can see, it's done a very good job of centering the page because that's where the fold is and that's where the center is. So yes, thank you, Canon. Not sponsored. So as you can see, I've just printed my booklet. And now all I have to do is to staple it and also to use an X-Acto knife to trim the edges so that it's full bleed. And that's it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that it has demystified InDesign somewhat. If you found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment in the comments section below. And I will see you in future videos for more vlogs and tutorials.